I found a key in my wife's car to a house I had never seen. It happened because my pickup was in the shop, and I borrowed Diane's Subaru to pick up a ceiling fan. I opened the center console, looking for a tape measure. Instead, I found a brass house key with a white plastic tag wired through the top. Someone had written an address on it: 1847 North Linden Street. Same city, Boise, Idaho. I knew the neighborhood. Older houses, small yards, nothing unusual. But I had never been to that address. Diane and I had been married 39 years. I knew the keys to her sister's condo, our son's place, and the little cabinet at the community center where she volunteered. This was different. That evening, I put the key beside her coffee mug. "What's on Linden Street?" Diane looked at it, only for a fraction too long. Then she picked it up. "Just a house." I got that far. She rubbed her thumb across the handwritten tag. "A friend gave me a spare." "What friend?" "Someone I help out sometimes." Diane slipped the key into her purse. "My name is Harold Vance. I was 68, retired after 35 years maintaining equipment for a commercial bakery." Diane had worked most of her life as a receptionist in a pediatric dental office and had cut back to 2 days a week. We were not people who hid addresses from each other. At least, I had never thought we were. The next Saturday, I noticed a package of furnace filters in our mudroom. Wrong size for our furnace. 16 by 20. I asked about them. Diane said they were on sale. Our furnace takes 16 by 25. I know. She carried them to her car. I almost asked again. I did not. 3 days later, I was driving home from a hardware store when traffic backed up near Linden Street. I could have stayed on the main road. Instead, I turned. I told myself I was curious. Then I saw a Diane Subaru parked in front of number 1847. The house was ordinary enough to make everything worse. Tan siding, dark green shutters, a basketball hoop over the garage with no net, 2 flower pots on the porch, one empty. Diane's car sat in the driveway. I parked half a block away. I did not touch the key. I did not walk up to the house. I sat there feeling foolish until the front door opened. A man came out first. Mid-40s, maybe 50. Work boots. Gray sweatshirt. Diane followed him. He carried one of the furnace filters under his arm. They stood near her car talking. Then the man's face folded. That is the only way I can describe it. He looked down. Diane reached up and put both hands against the sides of his face. He closed his eyes. Then he leaned forward and rested his forehead against her shoulder. She held him there. Not long. Long enough. I drove away before they separated. By the time Diane came home, I had changed my theory 3 times. A man she loved. A man she once loved. A man she wished she had chosen instead of me. She came into the kitchen carrying an empty, reusable grocery tote. "Hungry?" "No." She opened the refrigerator. I said, "Who lives at 1847 North Linden?" Her hand stopped on the refrigerator door. Slowly, she closed it. "You drove by." "Yes." "You followed me?" "No. I saw your car." That was technically true. She sat down. "His name is Owen Mercer." The surname reached somewhere into my memory, but did not settle. "How long have you known him?" "Since he was a kid." That made me look at her. "A kid?" "He's 47 now." "Whose kid?" Diane stared at the table. Then she said, "Elaine Mercer's." I knew that name immediately. Elaine and Tom Mercer had lived next door to us 26 years earlier. We had once been close enough to keep keys to each other's houses. Then something happened between our families. Something I had spent years describing with one simple sentence. The Mercers took advantage of us. Diane had never agreed with that sentence. Elaine Mercer was the kind of neighbor who knocked once and entered while she was still knocking. For years, that was normal. She fed our dog when we traveled. Diane picked up her groceries when Elaine's car broke down. Tom helped me rebuild our backyard fence. We shared lawn equipment, ladders, coolers, and more dinners than I could count. Owen was 21 then. He worked construction with Tom and had a reputation for starting plans faster than he finished them. The trouble began when Tom lost several months of work after his company folded. The Mercers were stretched thin. Diane began helping without making a production of it. A grocery run, a tank of gas. Tom borrowed my truck for a job interview. None of that bothered me at first. Then they asked for money. $1,200 to replace their furnace before winter. I said yes. They promised to repay us within 3 months. 3 months became 6. Meanwhile, our own expenses were climbing. Our daughter was starting college. My mother needed help with rent after moving into senior housing. I became increasingly aware of every favor the Mercers asked for. Diane became increasingly annoyed by the way I counted them. One evening I said, "There has to be a line somewhere." She answered, "They're our friends. That doesn't mean we become their emergency fund." The sentence turned into a fight, not our worst. One of those practical marriage fights where both people sound reasonable and neither one feels heard. Eventually, the Mercers moved to another part of Boise. We stopped seeing them. I remembered Elaine sending a Christmas card the first year. Diane sent one back. After that, nothing, or so I believed. Now Elaine's son lived in a house my wife could unlock. I asked Diane whether Elaine lived there too. No. Tom. No. Then why are you helping Owen? He needs help sometimes. That's not an answer. It's the answer I have right now. What happened outside the house? Diane looked at me. Owen had a hard morning. About what? That's his business. There it was. A boundary around his life. And I was standing outside it. The next clue was almost embarrassingly small. Furnace filters. I began noticing them because once you know an object matters, your eyes find it everywhere. Every few months, Diane bought a 2-pack. Same size, 16 by 20. Sometimes she also bought smoke detector batteries or a bottle of drain cleaner. Nothing expensive. Nothing secret enough to justify secrecy. That was what bothered me. One Thursday, she came home carrying a small hardware store bag. I said, "Linden Street?" She stopped taking off her coat. "Yes." "Thank you." "For what?" "For telling me." Diane gave me a tired look. "I told you because I'm tired pretending you don't know." That was not the same as openness, but it was a start. I asked whether Elaine knew Diane had a key. "Yes." "Where is she?" "Arizona." "Living there?" "Yes." "Since when?" "About 9 years." Owen had bought the Linden Street house after returning to Boise following a divorce. Elaine spent part of each year with him before moving permanently to Tucson with her sister. The house was Owen's. The key was practical. Diane checked on the place when he traveled for construction jobs. She let in repairmen when his workday ran late. She watered the backyard garden during summer. She changed the furnace filter because Owen forgot. The first major truth should have made me feel ridiculous. There was no affair. Owen was not Diane's lover. She had known him since he was a lanky kid who borrowed our lawn mower and never put enough gas back in it. The scene I saw outside the house had another explanation. Owen's oldest daughter had called that morning and told him she was moving across the country after college. He had taken it harder than he expected. Diane had comforted him. That was all. Relief came fast, then disappeared. "How long have you been doing this?" Diane looked at the hardware bag in her hand. 7 years. 7 years of spare keys. 7 years of errands. 7 years of a household that existed beside our marriage without my knowledge. I said, "Why would you hide something this ordinary?" Diane sat down. Because it wasn't ordinary when it started. Diane and Elaine crossed paths again 9 years earlier because of the couple who had bought our old house after we moved. Their daughter was organizing a casual neighborhood reunion at a church fellowship hall for several longtime residents who had lived on the block in the 90s. Diane almost skipped it. I had no interest in going. She went alone. Elaine was there. They saw each other across a table covered with store-bought cookies and paper cups of coffee. At first, they talked for maybe 5 minutes. Weather, children who had moved, who still lived nearby. No apology, no dramatic reunion. A few weeks later, Diane called a former neighbor to thank her for organizing a gathering and asked for Elaine's number. Then came coffee. Months later, another. By the time the old kitchen incident finally came up, they had both had enough distance to remember it without shouting. What old kitchen incident? I asked. Diane looked surprised. You really don't remember how it ended? I remembered alone. That was part of it. I remembered Tom avoiding me after the 6-month mark. I remembered Elaine becoming defensive whenever money came up. I remembered deciding that generosity, without limits, turned into resentment. All true, but Diane remembered another afternoon. Elaine came to our house while I was replacing a kitchen faucet. Tom had managed to repay $600, half the loan. Elaine brought the cash herself. I vaguely remembered her standing in our kitchen. I did not remember money. Diane did. Elaine placed $600 on the counter. She said Tom could pay the rest over the next few months. I was tired. Water had been shut off for 2 hours. Our daughter had called asking for another textbook expense. My mother had just needed more help with her senior housing rent. I looked at the cash and said, keep it. At first, Elaine thought I was forgiving the remaining debt. Then I added, bring it back when you have all of it. I'm done keeping track of pieces. The room changed. I remember that part. Not the words exactly. The feeling. Elaine picked up the money. Diane said, Harold. I said, no, I'm tired of this being every conversation. Then I took the spare key to our house off the hook near the refrigerator. I handed it to Elaine. You won't need this anymore. I had thought I was setting a boundary. Clear. Practical. No more blurred favors. Diane remembered Elaine staring at the key in her palm. She wasn't crying. Diane said, that almost made it worse. Then Elaine reached into her purse. She placed the key to her own house on our counter and walked out. I had remembered the loan ending our friendship. Diane remembered me ending it with 2 keys on a kitchen counter. That was the second major truth. I had not ruined the Mercers' lives. Tom found steady work again. They repaid the remaining money through a cashier's check several months later. Owen made his own mistakes, including leaving jobs when he got bored and borrowing from his parents longer than he should have. Elaine had pride of her own. After that afternoon, she refused Diane's first attempt to talk because she did not want pity. Tom was embarrassed and avoided me. Our friendship died because several people found it easier to stay offended than return to the kitchen. But I had done one thing I had never understood. I turned practical limits into a verdict on the relationship. Diane said, you could have said we couldn't lend more money. I thought that was what I said. No, you handed her the key. I leaned back. I was angry. I know. We had our own problems. I know that too. She was not rewriting history to make me cruel. That made it harder to defend myself. At the neighborhood gathering 9 years earlier, Diane and Elaine barely got past pleasantries. Their first coffee was not much warmer. Only later did they talk about the kitchen. Elaine admitted she should never have let the debt drag on without confronting us. Diane admitted she had helped the Mercers in small ways without always telling me because money conversations made me rigid. They did not restore the old friendship overnight. They saw each other occasionally. Then Elaine began preparing to move to Arizona. Owen had recently bought the Linden Street house and was struggling to manage work, his daughters, and repairs after his divorce. Elaine asked Diane one day, would you check on him once in a while? That was how it started. No secret romance. No great obligation. A furnace filter. A ride to pick up a truck. Waiting for a plumber because Owen could not leave a job site. Then the house key. Why didn't you tell me when Elaine moved? Diane looked at me. Because I knew exactly what you would do. What? Turn it into a decision. I almost argued. Then I remembered $600 sitting beside a broken faucet. Diane was right about one part of me. When something made me anxious, I preferred rules. How much are we lending? How often are we helping? When does this stop? Rules made me feel fair. What I had never understood was that I sometimes use clarity as a substitute for listening. Still, Diane's secrecy was not harmless. You could have told me after the first year. Yes. The third? Yes. 7 years. She looked away. Yes. Then stop making this only about who I used to be. Her eyes came back to mine. I'm not. She admitted the first year felt almost defiant. She liked being able to help Elaine and Owen without asking whether I thought the help was reasonable. Part of her wanted proof that the boundary I drew decades earlier did not control her forever. That sounds like resentment. It was. And later I was embarrassed. About helping them? About hiding it. Each year made confession harder. Telling me after 1 month meant one uncomfortable conversation. After 7 years, she would have to explain 7 years. So she kept carrying the key. She also admitted she enjoyed having a relationship I could not organize. That one landed badly. You thought I'd take over. I thought you'd measure it. Maybe I would have. I know. I asked whether Owen knew. I had no idea. Yes. That hurt more than I expected. What did he think of me? Diane rubbed her forehead. He mostly didn't think about you, Harold. I almost laughed. I had spent days imagining myself at the center of a hidden emotional world. Owen was changing furnace filters badly and worrying about his daughters. Elaine was living in Tucson. Diane was helping because she had chosen to. My presence in the story was old, not constant. That evening, Diane placed a Linden Street key on the kitchen counter, not giving it to me, just not hiding it. I touched the white address tag. The ink had faded where her thumb had rubbed it for years. Do you want me to stop going? She asked. No. The answer surprised both of us. Then I added, I want to stop finding out afterward. She nodded. That's fair. A week later, Owen called our house. Diane answered. She listened, then looked at me. The bathroom exhaust fan quit. I waited. He wants to know if I can let the electrician in tomorrow. Normally, she would have handled it without mentioning anything. Instead, she asked, Do you mind if I go? The question irritated me in a different direction. You don't need my permission. I know. Then don't turn honesty into permission. Diane stared at me, then smiled a little. That sounded almost healthy. Don't get used to it. The next day, I passed Linden Street on purpose, not secretly. Diane knew I had an appointment nearby. Her Subaru was in the driveway. A service van sat behind it. I kept driving. Later that week, I asked why Owen could not change his own furnace filter. Diane said, He can. He forgets. I said he's 47. She raised one eyebrow. I heard myself. Never mind. We both laughed. Not much. Enough. Diane told Elaine that I knew. What did she say? I asked that it took us long enough. I wanted to know whether Elaine still hated me. Diane would not answer for her. That frustrated me for about a minute. Then I understood. If I ever spoke to Elaine again, the apology would be mine to offer. Whatever she did with it would belong to her. Several weeks passed. The Linden Street key stopped disappearing into Diane's purse immediately after use. Sometimes it sat beside our grocery coupons. Once I moved it so I could wipe the counter, then put it back in exactly the same place. On a Thursday morning, Diane came downstairs holding the old white tag. The plastic had cracked near the wire. I need to replace this before it falls off. I looked at the address, barely readable now. Then I opened the junk drawer and took out a new plastic tag. I did not write the address for her. That would have been the old version of helping. I set the blank tag beside the key. Diane looked at it. Thanks. 2 days later, Owen's kitchen faucet started leaking. Diane told me while we were making breakfast. Plumber's coming at 10. Linden Street? Yes. She buttered toast. I'm going to let him in. Okay. No explanation. No defensive tone. Just information. She went upstairs to change. The key remained on the counter beside our own house keys. That was new. I poured another cup of coffee. When Diane came back down, she had her purse over one shoulder and the new white tag in her hand. She had written the address herself. 1847 and Linden. The old cracked tag was still attached beside it. You're keeping both? For now. She searched the counter. Where'd I put the key? I pointed beside the sugar bowl. There. Diane reached for it, then stopped. Would you hand it to me? I picked it up. For half a second, an old reflex surfaced. Asked when she would be back. Asked whether Owen would be there. Asked whether the plumber really needed someone to wait. I held the key out. Diane took it. Thanks. See you later. She slipped it into the outside pocket of her purse, not the hidden zippered one she had used before. Then she picked up her travel mug and left. I watched from the kitchen window as she crossed the driveway. She did not look back to see whether I was watching. A few minutes later, I cleared breakfast. Our house keys were still on the counter. The old cracked address tag Diane had removed lay beside them. I turned it over once in my hand. Then I dropped it into the trash. That afternoon, Diane came home and set her purse on the kitchen chair. The Linden Street key was still in the open outside pocket. The new white tag rested against the fabric, the address facing up